Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that a driver instructor in Waterford is facing pressure from a learner's family to present the learner for their driving test, despite the instructor having reservations about the learner's consistent ability to handle complex junctions independently and their tendency to hesitate at roundabouts. The instructor is concerned that the learner is not yet fully proficient according to the standards expected for independent driving in Ireland. Considering the regulatory framework of the Road Traffic Act 2010, and the ethical obligations of a driving instructor, which approach best addresses this situation? Option A. Agree to present the learner for the test, but instruct the learner to rely on the examiner's guidance and to hope for the best on the day, as they can always retake the test if they fail. Option B. Inform the family that, while the learner has some areas to improve, it is ultimately the learner's decision whether to proceed with the test, and the instructor will facilitate their request. Option C. Advise the family that the learner will be presented for the test only when they consistently demonstrate the required level of competence and independent decision-making skills as outlined in the official DVSA syllabus, and continue to provide targeted training to address the identified weaknesses. Option D. Focus training exclusively on the maneuvers the learner performs well and downplay the importance of the complex junctions and roundabout skills, suggesting these are less critical for passing the test. The correct answer is C. Advise the family that the learner will be presented for the test only when they consistently demonstrate the required level of competence and independent decision-making skills as outlined in the official DVSA syllabus, and continue to provide targeted training to address the identified weaknesses. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor because it involves balancing the immediate need to pass a learner driver with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and adherence to the Road Traffic Act 2010 of Ireland. The instructor must navigate the pressure from the learner and their family against the ethical and legal obligation to only present a candidate for testing who is genuinely competent and safe to drive independently. Misjudging this balance can lead to serious consequences, including accidents, licensing of unsafe drivers, and damage to the instructor's professional reputation and the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA standards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective assessment of the learner's driving skills against the official DVSA syllabus for the Waterford area. This means ensuring the learner can consistently demonstrate safe driving practices, independent decision-making, and adherence to all traffic laws and road signs without prompting or significant intervention from the instructor. The instructor must be confident that the learner can operate a vehicle safely and responsibly in various traffic and road conditions typical of Waterford, including urban streets, rural roads, and potentially challenging junctions, as outlined in the official DVSA testing criteria. This approach prioritizes public safety and upholds the integrity of the driving test process, aligning with the core principles of responsible driver training and the legal requirements for obtaining a driving license in Ireland. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting a learner for testing who is not fully competent, even if they can perform most maneuvers adequately, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach risks placing an untrained or inadequately trained driver on public roads, endangering themselves and others, and contravening the spirit and letter of the Road Traffic Act 2010, which mandates a certain level of competence for licensure. Encouraging a learner to wing it or rely on the examiner's potential leniency is unprofessional and undermines the purpose of the driving test, which is to certify competence, not to gamble on a pass. Similarly, focusing solely on passing the test without a genuine commitment to developing safe driving habits demonstrates a disregard for the learner's long-term safety and the safety of other road users. This prioritizes a short-term outcome over the fundamental responsibility of producing a safe and responsible driver. Professional reasoning. Professionals in driver instruction should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This involves 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to the DVSA syllabus and the Road Traffic Act 2010. 2. Conducting objective and continuous assessments of learner competence, identifying specific areas for improvement. 3. Communicating clearly and honestly with learners and their families about their progress and readiness for testing. 4. resisting external pressure to compromise professional standards. 5. Recognizing that the ultimate goal is to produce safe, responsible drivers, not just individuals who can pass a test. Question 2. Benchmark analysis indicates that a driver in Ontario is running late for an important appointment and notices a persistent warning light on their dashboard. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Attempt to diagnose or fix the issue by pulling over briefly on the shoulder of the highway. Option B. Immediately pull over to a safe location to assess the situation and contact roadside assistance or a mechanic. Option C. Ignore the warning light and focus on reaching the destination as quickly as possible. Option D. Continue driving to the appointment, hoping the warning light will turn off on its own. The correct answer is B. Immediately pull over to a safe location to assess the situation and contact roadside assistance or a mechanic. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to reach a destination with the paramount importance of adhering to traffic laws and ensuring the safety of themselves and others. The pressure of being late can lead to impulsive decisions that compromise safety and legality. Careful judgment is required to prioritize adherence to regulations over personal urgency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately pulling over to a safe location when a warning light illuminates. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential mechanical issue indicated by the warning light, preventing further damage to the vehicle, and more importantly, mitigating the risk of a breakdown or accident on a busy road. This aligns with the fundamental principle of safe driving and the legal obligation to operate a vehicle in a safe condition. Promptly addressing a warning light demonstrates responsible vehicle ownership and adherence to road safety regulations in Ontario. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to drive without addressing the warning light, even if the vehicle appears to be functioning normally, is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards the manufacturer's indication of a potential problem, which could escalate into a more serious mechanical failure, leading to a breakdown, increased repair costs, and a significant safety hazard for the driver and other road users. It also violates the implied duty to maintain one's vehicle in a roadworthy condition. Attempting to diagnose or fix the issue while driving is also professionally unacceptable. This is a dangerous distraction that diverts the driver's attention from the road, increasing the risk of an accident. Furthermore, attempting repairs without proper knowledge or tools could exacerbate the problem or create new hazards. This approach prioritizes a quick fix over safety and proper procedure. Ignoring the warning light and hoping it resolves itself is professionally unacceptable. This passive approach relies on chance rather than responsible action. Warning lights are designed to alert drivers to specific issues that require attention. Ignoring such a warning is a dereliction of duty and can lead to severe consequences, including vehicle damage, safety risks, and potential legal repercussions if the vehicle is involved in an incident due to the unaddressed fault. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and safety-first mindset. When faced with a vehicle warning light, the decision-making process should involve 1. Recognizing the warning as a signal of a potential issue. 2. Prioritizing safety and legality by ceasing operation in a safe manner. 3. Seeking professional diagnosis and repair. This framework ensures that vehicle maintenance is handled responsibly, minimizing risks and upholding professional standards of conduct on the road. Question 3. System analysis indicates a driving instructor in Ontario is preparing a student for their G2 road test. During a practice session, the student becomes visibly anxious, expressing concerns about making mistakes and failing the test. What is the most effective implementation strategy for the instructor to manage this situation and ensure continued progress towards the test? Option A. Reassure the student that the session is for practice and focus on reinforcing learned skills, gently redirecting their attention to the immediate driving task with clear instructions and positive feedback. Option B. Become overly critical of any minor errors the student makes, emphasizing the importance of perfection for the test. Option C. Allow the student to continue driving without significant correction, hoping they will overcome their anxiety and improve through self-correction. Option D. Tell the student to stop worrying and focus on driving, as the test is approaching and there is no time for nervousness. The correct answer is A. Reassure the student that the session is for practice and focus on reinforcing learned skills, gently redirecting their attention to the immediate driving task with clear instructions and positive feedback. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for driving instructors in Ontario, balancing the need to prepare a student for the Ministry of Transportation (MTO) road test with the student's personal anxieties and potential for distraction. The instructor must adhere to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations regarding driver training, while also ensuring the student's safety and fostering confidence. The professional challenge lies in adapting teaching methods to individual student needs, without compromising the standards required for safe and legal driving in Ontario. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves calmly acknowledging the student's anxiety and reassuring them that the focus is on practicing the skills they have learned, emphasizing that the goal is preparation, not immediate perfection. The instructor should then gently redirect the student's attention back to the immediate driving task, using clear, concise instructions and positive reinforcement. This aligns with the MTO's emphasis on safe driving practices and the instructor's ethical responsibility to build a student's competence and confidence in a controlled manner. The Ontario Driver's Handbook, which forms the basis of MTO testing, prioritizes safe and defensive driving techniques, which are best learned through calm, focused practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the student's anxiety outright and insist they just drive, without acknowledging their feelings. This fails to address the underlying issue and can exacerbate nervousness, potentially leading to errors and a negative learning experience. It disregards the psychological aspect of learning to drive, which is crucial for developing safe habits. Another incorrect approach is to become overly critical or impatient, pointing out every minor mistake. This can overwhelm the student, making them more prone to errors and less likely to retain information. It deviates from the supportive and constructive role expected of a driving instructor under Ontario's driver education guidelines, which encourage a positive learning environment. A third incorrect approach is to allow the student to continue making the same mistakes without correction or redirection, hoping they will eventually figure it out. This is a failure of instruction and potentially compromises safety. The instructor has a duty of care and is responsible for ensuring the student understands and applies correct driving procedures as mandated by Ontario's traffic laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a client-centered approach, recognizing that learning is a process influenced by individual factors. This involves active listening, empathy, and adaptive teaching strategies. When faced with student anxiety, the professional should first validate their feelings, then gently guide them back to the task at hand, reinforcing learned skills and providing constructive feedback. Adherence to the specific regulatory framework, Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO guidelines, ensures that training is both effective and legally compliant, promoting safe driving practices. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a learner driver, during a lesson in County Waterford, is exhibiting significant difficulty and hesitation while attempting a complex maneuver, raising concerns about their immediate safety and ability to control the vehicle effectively. What is the most appropriate course of action for the approved driving instructor, ADDI, to take, in accordance with the Road Traffic Act 2010 and the RSA's driver theory test syllabus? Option A. Continue the maneuver but offer minimal verbal guidance, allowing the learner to navigate the situation independently. Option B. Immediately cease the maneuver, return the vehicle to a safe location, and explain to the learner that further practice is required before attempting this maneuver again, referencing the need for proficiency as outlined in the RSA syllabus. Option C. Stop the vehicle in a safe place and inform the learner that the lesson must end prematurely, advising them to arrange their own alternative transport home. Option D. Instruct the learner to continue the maneuver, encouraging them to just try their best and hoping they will eventually succeed. Correct answer is B. Immediately cease the maneuver, return the vehicle to a safe location, and explain to the learner that further practice is required before attempting this maneuver again, referencing the need for proficiency as outlined in the RSA syllabus. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor because it involves balancing the immediate need to complete a lesson with the paramount responsibility of ensuring a learner driver's safety and adherence to the Road Traffic Act 2010, as amended, and the RSA's driver theory test syllabus. The instructor must make a judgment call under pressure, considering the potential risks associated with a learner's inexperience and the legal and ethical implications of their actions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves prioritizing safety and legal compliance above all else. This means recognizing that the learner's current skill level, as demonstrated by their difficulty with a specific maneuver, poses an unacceptable risk to themselves and other road users. Therefore, the instructor should immediately cease the maneuver, return to a safe location, and explain to the learner why the maneuver cannot be completed safely at this time, referencing the need for further practice as outlined in the RSA syllabus. This aligns with the instructor's duty of care and the legal requirement to ensure a learner driver is competent before attempting potentially hazardous maneuvers. The Road Traffic Act 2010 mandates that learner drivers must be accompanied by a qualified driver who can supervise and control the vehicle, and this supervision extends to ensuring the learner is capable of performing maneuvers safely. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing the maneuver despite the learner's clear struggle and potential for error would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action disregards the instructor's duty of care and the potential for an accident, which could lead to injury or damage, and contravene the spirit and letter of road safety legislation. It also fails to adequately prepare the learner for the driver theory test in practical driving, as it bypasses the necessary skill development. Suggesting the learner just try their best, without intervention or modification of the lesson plan, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach abdicates the instructor's responsibility to guide and correct, potentially leading the learner to develop unsafe habits or to experience a dangerous situation. It fails to acknowledge the instructor's role in assessing competence and providing appropriate instruction as per the RSA's guidelines. Abandoning the learner at the roadside to find alternative transport is an extreme dereliction of duty and a serious breach of professional conduct and legal obligation. This action would leave the learner in a vulnerable and unsafe situation, violating the instructor's contractual and ethical responsibilities, and potentially contravening regulations concerning the supervision of learner drivers. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Immediate hazard identification and assessment, the learner's struggle with the maneuver. 2. Evaluation of potential consequences, accident, injury, legal repercussions. 3. Consideration of available options, continue, stop, modify. 4. Selection of the safest and most legally compliant option, stopping and returning to a safe location. And 5. Clear communication and justification of the decision to the learner, reinforcing learning objectives and safety principles. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that a driver examination center in Ontario is experiencing pressure to expedite the licensing process. An examiner is tasked with evaluating an applicant who claims to be a proficient driver and has been practicing extensively in a familiar neighborhood. The examiner is aware that completing the full, standardized road test will take the allotted time. Which of the following approaches best upholds the regulatory framework and professional ethics for driver licensing in Ontario? Option A. Pass the applicant based on a brief observation of their driving in the familiar neighborhood, assuming their proficiency given their claims and the limited time available. Option B. Conduct the full, standardized road test as mandated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, assessing all required driving skills and criteria to ensure the applicant meets the necessary safety standards for operating a vehicle on public roads. Option C. Pass the applicant because they are known to the examiner's family, and the examiner wants to facilitate their ability to drive for work. Option D. Overlook several minor driving errors observed during a shortened assessment, as the applicant demonstrates good control in most situations, and the examiner wants to expedite the process. The correct answer is B. Conduct the full, standardized road test as mandated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, assessing all required driving skills and criteria to ensure the applicant meets the necessary safety standards for operating a vehicle on public roads. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the regulatory requirement to ensure all applicants meet the necessary safety standards. The pressure to expedite the process, potentially due to applicant or internal demands, can create a conflict with the duty to uphold the integrity of the licensing system. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising safety for expediency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves adhering strictly to the established procedures for assessing driver competency as outlined by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, MTO, regulations. This means conducting a thorough road test that covers all required skills and criteria, regardless of any perceived familiarity with the applicant or external pressures. The MTO's driver's handbook and accompanying testing standards are designed to ensure that all licensed drivers possess the minimum skills necessary for safe operation of a vehicle on Ontario roads. Upholding these standards is a fundamental ethical and regulatory obligation for examiners. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves passing an applicant based on a brief observation of their driving in a familiar setting, such as a parking lot, without completing the full road test. This fails to assess critical skills like navigating traffic, responding to hazards, or adhering to road signs and signals, directly contravening MTO testing protocols and compromising public safety. Another incorrect approach is to pass an applicant because they are known to the examiner or have a personal connection. This constitutes a serious ethical breach, as it introduces bias and undermines the fairness and impartiality of the licensing process. It violates the principle of equal treatment for all applicants and erodes public trust in the licensing authority. A third incorrect approach is to overlook minor driving errors due to time constraints or a desire to be lenient. While some minor errors might be permissible under specific MTO guidelines, a pattern of errors or errors that demonstrate a lack of fundamental control or awareness of road conditions cannot be ignored. This approach risks issuing licenses to individuals who may not be fully competent, thereby endangering themselves and other road users, and failing to meet the MTO's mandate for safe driving. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing all relevant MTO regulations and testing standards. 2. Maintaining strict impartiality and avoiding any personal biases or external influences. 3. Conducting all assessments thoroughly and objectively, documenting all observations accurately. 4. Recognizing that the integrity of the licensing system depends on consistent and fair application of the rules. 5. Seeking clarification or guidance from supervisors when faced with ambiguous situations or pressure to deviate from established procedures. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some driving instructors in Ontario are hesitant to recommend students for their road test due to the students' expressed anxiety, even when their practical driving skills appear to meet the standards outlined in the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. Considering the ethical obligations and regulatory framework of driving instruction in Ontario, what is the most appropriate course of action for an instructor in this situation? Option A. Postpone the recommendation for the road test until the student's anxiety completely disappears, regardless of their demonstrated driving proficiency. Option B. Advise the student to focus on practice tests that mimic the examiner's potential questions and scenarios, even if these deviate from official MTO testing protocols. Option C. Recommend the student for the road test if they consistently demonstrate safe driving practices and adherence to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, while also providing strategies to manage their test anxiety. Option D. Refuse to recommend the student for the road test solely because of their anxiety, even if their driving skills are excellent and comply with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. The correct answer is C. Recommend the student for the road test if they consistently demonstrate safe driving practices and adherence to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, while also providing strategies to manage their test anxiety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, due to the inherent conflict between a student's eagerness to pass and the instructor's ethical and legal obligation to ensure road safety and adherence to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. The instructor must balance the student's subjective desire for a passing grade with objective safety standards and regulatory requirements. Misjudging this balance can lead to unqualified drivers on the road, compromising public safety, and potentially resulting in legal repercussions for the instructor and the Ministry of Transportation Ontario, MTO. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the student's demonstrated ability to safely operate a vehicle in accordance with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and the MTO's testing standards. This means the instructor must objectively assess the student's performance against the established criteria for a road test, focusing on their consistent adherence to traffic laws, safe driving habits, and defensive driving techniques. If the student consistently demonstrates these competencies throughout their lessons and practice, even if they express anxiety, the instructor should confidently recommend them for the road test. This approach aligns with the MTO's mandate to license safe drivers and upholds the instructor's professional responsibility to act in the public interest. Incorrect approach is analysis. Recommending the student for the road test solely based on their expressed anxiety and the instructor's desire to alleviate it, without sufficient evidence of their readiness according to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO standards, is professionally unacceptable. This approach prioritizes the student's emotional state over objective safety and regulatory compliance, potentially leading to the licensing of an unsafe driver. Refusing to recommend the student for the road test despite their consistent demonstration of safe driving skills and adherence to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, simply because they are anxious, is also professionally unsound. While anxiety needs to be managed, it should not be the sole determinant of readiness if the student's practical skills meet the required standards. This approach fails to acknowledge the student's progress and may unnecessarily delay their licensing. Suggesting the student engage in practice tests that deviate from the official MTO testing criteria or the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, with the implicit goal of tricking the examiner or creating a false sense of security, is unethical and unprofessional. Such actions undermine the integrity of the licensing process and do not prepare the student for real-world driving conditions or the actual test requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective assessment against established standards. This involves 1. Understanding and consistently applying the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO testing criteria. 2. Conducting thorough and objective evaluations of student performance, focusing on observable behaviors and adherence to rules. 3. Communicating clearly and constructively with students about their progress and areas for improvement. 4. Making recommendations for road tests only when the student demonstrably meets all safety and regulatory requirements, balancing student well-being with public safety. Question 7. Benchmark analysis indicates that a learner driver in Waterford, who has completed the required number of lessons and expresses strong confidence in their ability, is requesting to book their driving test immediately. As their instructor, you have observed some recurring minor errors in their hazard perception and lane discipline during recent lessons. Considering the Road Traffic Driving Licensing, Regulations 2016, and the Road Safety Authority (RSA) Code of Practice for Driving Instructors, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Inform the learner that they must wait an additional period, regardless of their perceived readiness, to fulfill a predetermined lesson count beyond the regulatory minimum. Option B. Advise the learner that their confidence is sufficient and proceed with booking the test, while acknowledging that some minor errors may be overlooked by the examiner. Option C. Book the driving test as requested by the learner, focusing the remaining lessons on practicing common test routes in Waterford to familiarize them with the specific areas. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive mock driving test simulating the actual test conditions and criteria, providing detailed feedback on all aspects of the RSA syllabus, and only proceed with booking the test if the learner demonstrates consistent competence across all areas. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive mock driving test simulating the actual test conditions and criteria, providing detailed feedback on all aspects of the RSA syllabus, and only proceed with booking the test if the learner demonstrates consistent competence across all areas. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor regarding the proper application of the Road Traffic Driving Licensing, Regulations 2016, and the Road Safety Authority (RSA) Code of Practice for Driving Instructors. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to accommodate a learner driver's request with the overarching responsibility to ensure the learner is adequately prepared and adheres to legal requirements for their driving test. Misjudging this balance could lead to a failed test, potential safety risks, and a breach of professional conduct. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the learner's readiness against the specific criteria outlined in the RSA syllabus for the Waterford driving test. This includes evaluating their proficiency in all required driving skills, their understanding of road rules, and their ability to anticipate and react to traffic situations. The instructor must ensure the learner has achieved a consistent level of competence that meets or exceeds the standards expected for a pass. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the instructor's duty of care, the regulatory requirements for licensing, and the ethical obligation to prepare a safe and competent driver, thereby maximizing the learner's chances of success on their actual test. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that prioritizes the learner's perceived readiness based solely on their subjective feeling or the instructor's desire to secure a booking, without a rigorous, objective assessment against the RSA syllabus, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to uphold the instructor's responsibility to ensure competence and could lead to the learner undertaking the test unprepared, resulting in failure and wasted fees. It also potentially compromises road safety by presenting an inadequately trained driver. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with booking the test based on the learner's insistence, even if the instructor has significant reservations about their preparedness. This prioritizes the learner's immediate desire over their long-term safety and success, and the instructor's professional judgment. It disregards the instructor's role as a gatekeeper of competence and could be seen as facilitating a potentially unsafe situation. Finally, an approach that focuses on cramming specific test routes or maneuvers in the days leading up to the test, rather than ensuring comprehensive skill development across all aspects of the syllabus, is also professionally flawed. While familiarity with test areas can be beneficial, it should not replace a solid foundation of driving skills and hazard perception. This approach risks creating a driver who can pass a specific test but may not be a safe, adaptable driver in varied real-world conditions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant regulatory framework, road traffic, driving licensing, Regulations 2016, RSA Code of Practice. This is followed by an objective assessment of the learner's performance against the defined syllabus and competency standards. The instructor must then weigh the learner's progress and confidence against these objective measures, considering the potential consequences of both proceeding and delaying the test. Open and honest communication with the learner about their readiness, supported by evidence from their performance, is crucial. The ultimate decision should prioritize road safety and the learner's long-term competence, even if it means advising against an immediate test booking. Question 8. Benchmark analysis indicates that a driving instructor in Waterford, Ireland, has a student who is eager to book their driving test, believing they are ready. However, the instructor has observed several recurring errors during lessons that, in their professional judgment, fall below the standard required for a safe and competent driver according to the Road Traffic, Driving Licensing, Regulations 2008. The student is becoming insistent, and the instructor feels pressure to proceed. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Advise the student to simply give it a go and see what happens, as they might get lucky. Option B. Insist the student takes the test immediately to see how they perform without further discussion of their readiness. Option C. Firmly but constructively explain to the student that they are not yet ready for the test, detailing the specific areas needing improvement based on the official driving test syllabus, and offer further targeted lessons. Option D. Agree to book the test for the student, hoping they will pass despite the observed deficiencies. The correct answer is C. Firmly but constructively explain to the student that they are not yet ready for the test, detailing the specific areas needing improvement based on the official driving test syllabus, and offer further targeted lessons. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor due to the potential conflict between a student's perceived readiness and the instructor's obligation to ensure public safety and adherence to the Road Traffic, Driving Licensing, Regulations 2008 in Ireland. The instructor must balance the student's desire to pass with the paramount importance of safe driving practices and regulatory compliance. This requires careful judgment to avoid compromising standards or misleading the student. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the driver-instructor firmly but constructively explaining to the student that they are not yet ready for the test. This approach prioritizes the student's safety and the safety of other road users, aligning with the core ethical duty of a driving instructor and the spirit of the Road Traffic, Driving Licensing, Regulations 2008, which aim to ensure only competent drivers are licensed. The instructor should clearly articulate the specific areas where the student needs further practice, referencing the standards expected in the official driving test syllabus. This ensures transparency and provides the student with actionable feedback for improvement, fostering responsible learning. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to agree to put the student forward for the test despite reservations. This action directly contravenes the instructor's ethical responsibility to ensure their students are safe and competent drivers. It also undermines the integrity of the licensing process, potentially leading to an unqualified driver on the road, which is a serious breach of public safety and regulatory intent. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the student's concerns and insist they take the test immediately without addressing their perceived lack of readiness. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and professional judgment, failing to acknowledge the student's anxieties and potentially causing them undue stress. It also neglects the instructor's duty to provide tailored guidance and support. A further incorrect approach is to suggest the student just try their luck and hope for the best. This is highly unprofessional and irresponsible. It implies a disregard for the rigorous standards set by the licensing authority and treats the driving test as a game of chance rather than a measure of genuine skill and safety. This approach is ethically unsound and potentially dangerous. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, regulatory compliance, and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Assessing the student's performance against established standards, the driving test syllabus. 2. Communicating findings clearly and constructively to the student, explaining the rationale behind any recommendations. 3. Offering a plan for further training to address identified weaknesses. 4. Upholding professional integrity by refusing to compromise on safety or regulatory requirements, even under pressure. Question 9. Market research demonstrates that new drivers in Ontario often struggle with making split-second decisions when faced with unexpected road hazards. During a supervised driving session on a quiet residential street in Toronto, your student, who is practicing lane changes, suddenly swerves to avoid a parked car that has just opened its door, forcing you to apply the brakes. Which of the following represents the most effective and professionally responsible approach to address this situation? Option A, take immediate control of the steering wheel and pedals to prevent any further erratic movement, and then verbally reprimand the student for their poor judgment and lack of awareness. Option B, after the incident, simply state, "That was close," and then ask the student if they are ready to practice parallel parking. Option C, continue the lesson without comment, assuming the student learned from the experience, and address the incident only if it occurs again later in the lesson. Option D, immediately after the immediate danger has passed, calmly explain to the student the correct procedure for checking blind spots and mirrors before initiating a lane change, referencing the Ontario Highway Traffic Act's requirements for safe lane changes and the principles of defensive driving. The correct answer is D. Immediately after the immediate danger has passed, calmly explain to the student the correct procedure for checking blind spots and mirrors before initiating a lane change, referencing the Ontario Highway Traffic Act's requirements for safe lane changes and the principles of defensive driving. Explanation. Market research demonstrates that a significant portion of new drivers in Ontario struggle with understanding and applying the principles of defensive driving in real-world scenarios, particularly when faced with unexpected situations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to not only impart knowledge, but also to assess a student's judgment and decision-making under pressure, which are critical for safe driving and are directly regulated by the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and Ministry of Transportation, MTO, guidelines for driver education. The instructor must balance the need to allow the student to practice decision-making with the paramount responsibility of ensuring safety and adherence to provincial traffic laws. The best approach involves the instructor actively observing the student's reactions and decision-making process during a simulated unexpected event, providing immediate, constructive feedback that references specific Ontario traffic laws and defensive driving principles. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core competency being tested: the student's ability to make safe and legal decisions in dynamic situations. It aligns with the MTO's emphasis on practical application of knowledge and the development of good judgment, as outlined in the driver's handbook and the requirements for licensed driving instructors. This method allows for real-time correction and reinforcement of safe driving behaviors, directly contributing to the student's preparedness for the actual road test and their future as a safe driver on Ontario roads. An incorrect approach would be to immediately intervene and take control of the vehicle, without allowing the student any opportunity to react or make a decision. This fails to assess the student's judgment and decision-making capabilities, which is a key component of safe driving and a focus of the Ontario G2 and G road tests. Ethically and regulatorily, the instructor has a duty to guide and assess, not to simply prevent any potential error by taking over. Another incorrect approach would be to simply explain what the student should have done after the situation has completely passed, without any immediate feedback or opportunity for the student to apply the advice in a similar context. This misses the critical window for learning and correction, and does not adequately prepare the student for the immediate decision-making required on the road. It also fails to meet the MTO's expectation of practical, hands-on instruction and assessment. A further incorrect approach would be to ignore the student's reaction and proceed as if the unexpected event did not occur. This demonstrates a lack of attentiveness to the student's performance and a failure to identify and address potential areas of weakness. It is professionally negligent and contravenes the instructor's responsibility to ensure the student is developing the necessary skills and judgment to operate a vehicle safely and legally in Ontario. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes observation, assessment, and timely, specific feedback. This involves anticipating potential hazards, allowing the student to navigate them within safe parameters, and then providing clear, actionable guidance rooted in the relevant provincial regulations and best practices for defensive driving. The goal is to foster independent, safe decision-making, not to simply prevent mistakes through constant intervention. Question 10. Operational review demonstrates that a driving instructor in Waterford has a standard fee of €600 for a comprehensive driving course, payable in full before the first lesson. A prospective client, who has expressed enthusiasm for the course, indicates they can only afford €300 upfront and would struggle to pay the remaining balance within the first 2 weeks. Considering the instructor's need to maintain consistent revenue and fair pricing, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Offer the client a structured installment plan, allowing them to pay the remaining €300 over 4 equal weekly payments of €75, with all payments to be completed before the final lesson of the course. Option B. Agree to a payment schedule where the client pays €300 upfront and the remaining €300 after completing all lessons. Option C. Insist on the full €600 payment before the first lesson, explaining that the pricing is non-negotiable. Option D. Provide a one-time discount of €100, reducing the total course fee to €500, payable in full before the first lesson. The correct answer is A. Offer the client a structured installment plan, allowing them to pay the remaining €300 over 4 equal weekly payments of €75, with all payments to be completed before the final lesson of the course. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor due to the potential for misinterpreting a client's financial situation, which could lead to either an overly lenient or an overly strict approach to payment. The instructor must balance the need to maintain a viable business with ethical considerations regarding fairness and accessibility for learners. The core of the challenge lies in applying a consistent and justifiable pricing structure while acknowledging individual circumstances without compromising business integrity or creating a precedent for preferential treatment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly communicating the standard fee structure and payment terms upfront, as per typical business practices and implied contractual agreements in service provision. When a client expresses difficulty, the instructor should offer a predefined, transparent installment plan that is available to all clients. This approach is correct because it upholds fairness and consistency, ensuring that no client receives an undue advantage or disadvantage. It aligns with general business ethics of transparent pricing and equitable service delivery. By offering a structured installment plan, the instructor provides a practical solution that allows the client to manage their payments without altering the fundamental cost of the service or creating a subjective pricing model. This maintains the instructor's financial stability and avoids potential disputes arising from ad hoc arrangements. Incorrect approach is analysis. Offering a significant ad hoc discount without a clear business rationale or policy is professionally unacceptable. This could be perceived as preferential treatment, potentially leading to resentment from other clients who paid the full price. It also undermines the instructor's established pricing and could negatively impact profitability. Furthermore, it sets a dangerous precedent for future clients. Insisting on immediate full payment without exploring any flexible options, even a standard installment plan, could be seen as lacking empathy and potentially alienating a client who might otherwise be a good student. While maintaining financial discipline is important, an absolute refusal to consider any form of payment flexibility, even a structured one, can be detrimental to client relationships and business growth. Agreeing to a payment schedule that is significantly longer than the standard installment plan, or one that is not clearly documented and agreed upon by both parties, introduces financial risk and ambiguity. This can lead to difficulties in tracking payments, potential losses, and a lack of clear contractual basis for the service provided. Professional reasoning. Professionals in service industries, like driving instruction, should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, fairness, and clear communication. This involves establishing a well-defined service offering with transparent pricing and payment terms. When faced with client financial challenges, the framework should include pre-established equitable solutions, such as flexible payment plans available to all. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the standard policy and its rationale. 2. Assessing the client's request against the established policy. 3. Offering pre-approved equitable alternatives if available. 4. Documenting any agreed-upon arrangements clearly. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are justifiable, consistent, and ethically sound, protecting both the business and its clients. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that a licensed driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, who also owns and operates a vehicle repair shop, has a student who is experiencing recurring minor engine issues with their vehicle. The student has expressed concern about the cost of repairs and has asked the instructor for advice on what might be wrong and where they should take their car. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Provide general advice on potential causes of the engine issues and recommend that the student seek a diagnosis and quote from a qualified mechanic, while disclosing their ownership of a repair shop and offering to provide a quote if the student wishes, but emphasizing their freedom to choose any service provider. Option B. Strongly recommend that the student bring their vehicle to the instructor's repair shop, highlighting the instructor's expertise and offering a small discount on the diagnostic fee. Option C. Refuse to discuss vehicle maintenance or repair issues with the student to avoid any appearance of impropriety, even if the student directly asks for advice. Option D. Advise the student to ignore the minor engine issues for now, as they are likely insignificant and not critical for learning to drive. Correct answer is A. Provide general advice on potential causes of the engine issues and recommend that the student seek a diagnosis and quote from a qualified mechanic, while disclosing their ownership of a repair shop and offering to provide a quote if the student wishes, but emphasizing their freedom to choose any service provider. Explanation. Operational review demonstrates a potential conflict of interest scenario for a licensed driver instructor in Ontario, Canada, who also operates a vehicle repair shop. The challenge lies in ensuring that the instructor's advice to students regarding vehicle maintenance and repair is objective and not influenced by their personal business interests. This requires a high degree of professional integrity and adherence to ethical guidelines to maintain public trust and uphold the standards of the driving instruction profession. The best approach involves prioritizing the student's best interests and maintaining transparency. This means providing unbiased advice on vehicle maintenance and repair, irrespective of whether the student chooses to use the instructor's repair shop. If a student inquires about repairs, the instructor should offer general advice and recommend seeking professional service from qualified mechanics without explicitly steering them towards their own business. If the student specifically asks about the instructor's repair services, the instructor should disclose their ownership interest and offer to provide a quote, while still emphasizing that the student is free to choose any repair service. This aligns with the ethical obligations of a driving instructor to act with honesty and integrity, and to avoid situations that could be perceived as exploitative or self-serving. The Ontario Highway Traffic Act and the Ministry of Transportation's guidelines for driving instructors emphasize the importance of professional conduct and avoiding conflicts of interest. An incorrect approach would be to subtly or overtly recommend their own repair shop for all vehicle issues, implying that it is the only or best option. This creates a direct conflict of interest and exploits the student's trust and potential lack of automotive knowledge. Such behavior violates the principle of acting in the student's best interest and could lead to students incurring unnecessary repair costs or receiving substandard service, which is contrary to the ethical standards expected of a driving instructor. Another incorrect approach is to avoid discussing vehicle maintenance altogether, even when relevant to safe driving. While this might seem like a way to sidestep the conflict, it fails to provide students with essential knowledge for responsible vehicle ownership and safe operation, which is a core aspect of comprehensive driver education. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to offer discounted repair services to students as a form of incentive for choosing their driving school. While seemingly beneficial, this blurs the lines between driving instruction and automotive services, creating a coercive environment and potentially compromising the objectivity of the driving instruction itself. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest. They should then assess the severity of the conflict and consider the impact on the student and the profession's reputation. The next step is to consult relevant professional codes of conduct and regulations. The chosen course of action should always prioritize transparency, objectivity, and the student's best interests, even if it means foregoing a potential business opportunity. Question 12. Cost-benefit analysis shows that waiting for the traffic signal at the intersection in Toronto will add approximately 2 minutes to your journey, potentially causing you to be late for a scheduled appointment. However, proceeding through the red light would save this time. Considering the Highway Traffic Act of Ontario, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Accelerate to try and make it through the intersection just as the light turns red. Option B. Wait for the traffic signal to turn green before proceeding through the intersection. Option C. Ignore the traffic signal and proceed based on your assessment of oncoming traffic. Option D. Proceed through the red traffic signal as the intersection appears clear and time is of the essence. The correct answer is B. Wait for the traffic signal to turn green before proceeding through the intersection. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial implications of a decision with the long-term safety and legal responsibilities of a driver. The pressure to complete a task quickly can conflict with the imperative to adhere to traffic laws and ensure the safety of oneself and others. A driver must exercise sound judgment, prioritizing compliance and safety over expediency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing adherence to traffic regulations and ensuring vehicle safety, even if it means a slight delay. This approach aligns with the fundamental principles of responsible driving, which are enshrined in the Highway Traffic Act of Ontario. Specifically, Section 41 of the Act mandates that drivers must obey traffic control signals and signs. Furthermore, the principle of due care and attention, implied throughout traffic legislation, requires drivers to operate their vehicles in a manner that does not endanger themselves or others. By choosing to wait for the traffic signal, the driver demonstrates a commitment to these legal and ethical obligations, preventing potential accidents and avoiding penalties. Incorrect approach is analysis. Choosing to proceed through a red traffic signal, even if the intersection appears clear, is a direct violation of Section 41 of the Highway Traffic Act of Ontario. This action demonstrates a disregard for traffic control devices, which are in place to manage traffic flow and prevent collisions. Ethically, it prioritizes personal convenience over the safety of other road users and pedestrians, creating an unacceptable risk. Attempting to rush through the intersection just as the light turns red, or slightly after, also constitutes a violation. This behavior indicates a failure to anticipate traffic signal changes and a willingness to take unnecessary risks. It can lead to collisions with vehicles entering the intersection legally on a green light or pedestrians crossing. This approach fails to uphold the duty of care expected of all drivers. Ignoring the traffic signal altogether and proceeding based on a personal assessment of traffic conditions is highly dangerous and illegal. Traffic signals are designed to create predictable patterns of movement. Deviating from this system introduces unpredictability and significantly increases the likelihood of severe accidents. This approach demonstrates a profound lack of judgment and a disregard for established safety protocols. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical conduct, and the safety of all involved. This involves 1. Identifying the core issue e.g., traffic signal status. 2. Recalling relevant rules and regulations, e.g., Highway Traffic Act of Ontario. 3. Assessing potential risks and consequences of different actions. 4. Choosing the option that best upholds legal and ethical standards, even if it requires more time or effort. In this case, the decision-making process clearly points to waiting for the green light as the only responsible and lawful course of action. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of minor delays at a specific intersection in Waterford during peak hours. What is the most professional and effective approach to address this observed traffic flow issue? Option A. Immediately implement a significant alteration to the traffic signal timings for the entire Waterford city center based on the single intersection's data. Option B. Disregard the data as minor fluctuations and maintain the current traffic management strategies for the intersection. Option C. Conduct a detailed analysis of the collected data to identify the root cause of the delays, consider a pilot program for adjusted signal timings or signage, and monitor the impact before wider implementation. Option D. Rely solely on informal complaints from a few local residents about congestion at that intersection to determine the necessary adjustments. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed analysis of the collected data to identify the root cause of the delays, consider a pilot program for adjusted signal timings or signage, and monitor the impact before wider implementation. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential for a significant impact on the operational efficiency and safety of Waterford's road network. The challenge lies in interpreting the data generated by this system to make informed decisions that balance the need for continuous improvement with the potential for disruption. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to avoid overreacting to isolated incidents or implementing changes that are not supported by comprehensive analysis, thereby potentially causing unnecessary inconvenience or compromising safety. The best approach involves a systematic and data-driven evaluation of the monitoring system's output. This means thoroughly analyzing trends, identifying recurring issues, and correlating them with specific road segments or traffic conditions within Waterford. Before proposing any changes to traffic management strategies, such as adjusting signal timings or implementing new signage, a pilot study or a phased implementation should be considered. This allows for real-world testing of the proposed solutions, gathering further data on their effectiveness, and making necessary adjustments based on observed outcomes. This aligns with the principles of evidence-based decision-making, which is crucial for ensuring that interventions are effective, efficient, and minimize unintended consequences for Waterford drivers. Implementing immediate, sweeping changes based on a single anomaly or a short-term spike in data is a flawed approach. This could lead to inefficient resource allocation and potentially create new problems, such as increased congestion in other areas or confusion for drivers unfamiliar with the new patterns. It fails to consider the broader context and the potential for temporary fluctuations in traffic flow. Ignoring the data altogether and continuing with existing traffic management protocols is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness to potential issues identified by the monitoring system and a failure to leverage available technology for the benefit of road users in Waterford. It neglects the proactive aspect of traffic management and the opportunity to enhance safety and efficiency. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on anecdotal feedback from a small group of drivers without corroborating it with the data from the monitoring system. While driver feedback is valuable, it can be subjective and may not represent the overall traffic conditions or the effectiveness of potential solutions across the entire Waterford road network. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes data integrity, thorough analysis, and a phased, evidence-based approach to implementing changes. This involves 1. Data collection and validation, ensuring the monitoring system is functioning correctly and the data is accurate. 2. Trend analysis, identifying patterns and significant deviations from normal operations. 3. Impact assessment, evaluating the potential consequences of any proposed changes on traffic flow, safety, and driver experience. 4. Pilot testing and iteration, implementing changes on a small scale, monitoring their effectiveness and making adjustments as needed. 5. Communication, informing relevant stakeholders and the public about any planned or implemented changes. Question 14. During the evaluation of readiness for the G2 road test in Ontario, a driver is feeling pressure to pass quickly due to upcoming travel plans. They have practiced basic driving, but are considering skipping dedicated practice for specific maneuvers like parallel parking and three-point turns, believing the examiner might not focus on them. Which approach best reflects responsible preparation and adherence to Ontario's licensing requirements? Option A. Prioritize practicing driving on common routes used by examiners, assuming that mastering these routes will be sufficient to pass the G2 road test. Option B. Dedicate significant practice time to all required maneuvers, including parallel parking and three-point turns, in various conditions, and focus on understanding and applying all traffic laws and defensive driving principles as outlined by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. Option C. Seek advice from friends on tricks to impress the examiner during the G2 road test, rather than focusing on the official testing criteria. Option D. Minimize practice on specific maneuvers like parallel parking and three-point turns, focusing instead on general road driving, as these specific skills are less critical for overall safe driving. Correct answer is B. Dedicate significant practice time to all required maneuvers, including parallel parking and three-point turns, in various conditions, and focus on understanding and applying all traffic laws and defensive driving principles as outlined by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the overarching legal and safety requirements mandated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation for obtaining a driver's license. The pressure to pass quickly can lead to a temptation to bypass essential steps, which directly contravenes the principles of responsible driving and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety and adherence to the law over personal expediency. The best approach involves diligently preparing for the G2 road test by practicing all required maneuvers in various traffic conditions, including those that may be less familiar or more challenging. This includes understanding and demonstrating proficiency in hazard perception, defensive driving techniques, and adherence to all traffic laws as outlined in the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the stated objectives of the G2 road test, which are to ensure drivers possess the necessary skills and knowledge to operate a vehicle safely and responsibly on Ontario roads. The Ministry of Transportation's guidelines emphasize a thorough assessment of practical driving ability, and comprehensive preparation is the only ethically and legally sound method to meet these standards. An incorrect approach involves attempting to game the test by focusing solely on the specific routes the examiner is likely to take, without a genuine understanding of the underlying driving principles. This fails to address the core requirement of demonstrating safe driving in any situation, not just predictable ones. It also risks violating traffic laws if the driver is not truly attentive to all potential hazards. Another incorrect approach is to downplay the importance of specific maneuvers, such as parallel parking or three-point turns, believing they are less critical than general road driving. This is a regulatory failure because the G2 road test explicitly assesses proficiency in these specific skills as outlined by the Ministry of Transportation. Neglecting them demonstrates a lack of preparedness and a disregard for the established testing criteria. A further incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal advice from friends about tricks to impress the examiner, rather than focusing on fundamental safe driving practices. This is ethically problematic as it promotes a superficial understanding of driving and potentially encourages unsafe habits. It also fails to meet the regulatory requirement of demonstrating competence through actual skill and knowledge, not through superficial tactics. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adhering to the regulatory requirements of the licensing body. This involves thoroughly reviewing the official testing standards, seeking professional instruction if necessary, and dedicating sufficient time to practice all aspects of the required driving skills. The focus should always be on developing genuine competence and safety awareness, rather than simply passing the test through superficial means. Question 15. What factors determine the appropriate execution of a driving maneuver during the Waterford driver's test in Ontario, when an examiner's instructions might be perceived as incomplete or leading to an unexpected sequence? Option A. Anticipating the examiner's next instruction and proactively performing a related maneuver. Option B. Strict adherence to the examiner's explicit instructions and established testing procedures. Option C. Modifying a maneuver based on personal driving experience to demonstrate efficiency. Option D. Skipping a maneuver if the driver believes they have already demonstrated sufficient skill in that area. The correct answer is B. Strict adherence to the examiner's explicit instructions and established testing procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the overarching legal and safety obligations mandated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. The temptation to prioritize a quick, albeit non-compliant, solution over adherence to established procedures can lead to significant safety risks and legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to recognize that even minor deviations from testing protocols can have serious consequences. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves strictly adhering to the instructions provided by the examiner and the established procedures of the Waterford driver's test. This means completing the required maneuvers exactly as instructed, without attempting to anticipate or alter the examiner's directions. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the regulatory framework of the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, which emphasizes standardized testing to ensure all drivers possess the necessary skills and knowledge to operate a vehicle safely. The purpose of the test is to assess competency under controlled conditions, and any deviation undermines the validity of that assessment and compromises public safety. Ethical considerations also demand honesty and integrity in the testing process. Incorrect approaches analysis. Attempting to complete a maneuver that was not explicitly instructed by the examiner, even if it seems like a logical next step or a way to save time, is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a failure to follow directions, a critical component of safe driving, and a direct violation of testing protocol. It suggests a lack of attentiveness and an inability to operate within prescribed parameters, which are fundamental safety concerns. Performing a maneuver in a manner that deviates from the standard procedure taught and expected, even if the driver believes they are performing it correctly or more efficiently, is also professionally unacceptable. This indicates a potential misunderstanding of the required technique or a disregard for established safety standards. The test is designed to evaluate proficiency in the prescribed methods, not alternative approaches. Ignoring an examiner's instruction to perform a specific maneuver because the driver feels they have already demonstrated sufficient skill in that area is professionally unacceptable. This shows a lack of respect for the examiner's authority and the testing process. It also fails to acknowledge that the test is a comprehensive evaluation, and all components must be completed to ensure a complete assessment of the driver's capabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing clear communication, active listening, and strict adherence to established protocols. The decision-making framework involves 1. Understanding the objective of the task, passing the driving test safely and legally. 2. Recognizing the authority and role of the examiner. 3. Prioritizing safety and compliance with regulations above personal convenience or perceived shortcuts. 4. Seeking clarification if instructions are unclear, rather than making assumptions. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal that a driving instructor in Waterford has a client who is eager to book their driving test, stating they feel ready and want to proceed immediately. However, the instructor has observed significant hesitation and errors in the client's execution of essential maneuvers, particularly in busy Waterford traffic scenarios, which are critical components of the Waterford driver testing syllabus. The instructor is concerned the client is not yet competent to pass the test or drive safely independently. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Inform the client that they are not ready and refuse to book the test, without providing specific feedback related to the Waterford testing criteria. Option B. Book the driving test as requested by the client to accommodate their eagerness and avoid potential dissatisfaction. Option C. Offer to focus exclusively on practicing common test routes and examiner expectations to help the client pass the test, even if fundamental skills remain underdeveloped. Option D. Continue with the planned lessons, focusing on reinforcing the client's weaker areas as identified in the Waterford driver testing syllabus, and only book the test when the instructor is confident the client meets all competency standards. The correct answer is D. Continue with the planned lessons, focusing on reinforcing the client's weaker areas as identified in the Waterford driver testing syllabus, and only book the test when the instructor is confident the client meets all competency standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor because it involves a potential conflict between client satisfaction and adherence to the strict requirements of the Waterford driver licensing regulations. The instructor must balance the client's desire to pass quickly with the ethical and legal obligation to ensure the client is genuinely competent and safe to drive independently on Waterford roads. Failure to do so could result in the client obtaining a license without adequate skills, posing a risk to themselves and others, and potentially leading to disciplinary action against the instructor. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the client's readiness based on the established Waterford driver testing syllabus and the instructor's professional judgment. This means continuing with the planned lessons, focusing on areas where the client demonstrates weakness, and only proceeding to the test when the instructor is confident the client meets all competency standards outlined in the Waterford driver testing framework. This approach prioritizes public safety and upholds the integrity of the licensing process, aligning with the core principles of responsible driver instruction and the regulatory objectives of the Waterford Licensing Authority. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to accede to the client's request and book the test immediately, despite reservations about their readiness. This fails to uphold the instructor's duty of care and the regulatory requirement to ensure a candidate is competent before presenting them for assessment. It prioritizes expediency over safety and professional integrity, potentially leading to a failed test or worse, a license issued to an unsafe driver. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's concerns entirely and refuse to consider the test at all, without a clear, objective explanation tied to the syllabus. While safety is paramount, a complete refusal without constructive feedback can damage the professional relationship and may not be perceived as a balanced approach to client development. The instructor should provide clear, actionable feedback linked to the Waterford testing criteria. A third incorrect approach is to offer to coach the client on specific test routes or common examiner pitfalls without addressing fundamental driving skill deficiencies. This borders on unethical practice, as it focuses on gaming the test rather than developing genuine driving competence. It undermines the purpose of the test, which is to assess a driver's ability to handle a variety of situations safely and competently on Waterford roads. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. They should then objectively assess the client's performance against these standards, providing clear and constructive feedback. When a discrepancy exists between the client's perception of their readiness and the instructor's professional assessment, open communication is key. The instructor should explain the specific areas of concern, referencing the Waterford driver testing syllabus, and outline a clear plan for improvement. The ultimate decision to book a test must be based on a confident assessment of the client's ability to drive safely and competently, not on client pressure or a desire for a quick outcome. Question 17. The control framework reveals that a Waterford police officer has observed a vehicle weaving erratically across lanes and braking suddenly without apparent cause in a busy residential area. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the officer to ensure public safety and uphold traffic laws in Waterford? Option A. Assume the driver is experiencing a medical emergency and proceed with caution. Refrain from a traffic stop until the driver poses a direct threat. Option B. Radio dispatch to request a patrol car to monitor the vehicle from a different vantage point without directly engaging. Option C. Initiate a traffic stop to investigate the driver's behavior and assess for potential impairment or other violations. Option D. Continue following the vehicle at a safe distance to gather more evidence of specific traffic infractions before intervening. The correct answer is C. Initiate a traffic stop to investigate the driver's behavior and assess for potential impairment or other violations. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a driver, Mr. Henderson, has been observed exhibiting erratic driving behavior, including sudden lane changes and excessive speed, in a residential area of Waterford. This situation presents a professional challenge due to the immediate risk to public safety and the need for swift, appropriate action within the bounds of Waterford's traffic regulations and the Waterford Police Department's operational guidelines. The driver's behavior is not merely a minor infraction, but suggests a potential impairment or disregard for safety, necessitating a response that balances enforcement with due process. The best approach involves a proactive and safety-oriented intervention. This includes initiating a traffic stop to assess the driver's condition and the reasons for the observed behavior. The officer should approach the vehicle cautiously, observe for any signs of impairment, e.g., odor of alcohol, slurred speech, fumbling for documents, and clearly communicate the reason for the stop. The subsequent actions, such as requesting documentation, conducting field sobriety tests if warranted, and issuing citations or making an arrest, must strictly adhere to the Waterford Provincial Highway Traffic Act and establish police procedures for traffic stops and impaired driving investigations. This approach prioritizes public safety by addressing the immediate risk while ensuring that any enforcement action is legally sound and procedurally correct. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed behavior due to a lack of immediate evidence of a specific traffic violation like speeding or running a red light. While the initial observation might not fit a precise, easily tickable offense, the erratic nature of the driving itself constitutes a breach of safe driving practices and creates a hazard. Failing to act on such observations could lead to an accident, making the officer complicit in the potential harm. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately assume impairment and proceed with an arrest without conducting a proper investigation, including observing the driver and potentially administering field sobriety tests. This could lead to a wrongful arrest and legal repercussions. Finally, confronting the driver aggressively or without clearly stating the reason for the stop, outside of established protocols, could escalate the situation unnecessarily and compromise the safety of both the officer and the driver. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with observation and risk assessment. If observed behavior presents a clear and present danger, intervention is warranted. The nature of the intervention should be proportionate to the observed risk and guided by established legal statutes and departmental policies. This involves gathering information, assessing the situation based on evidence and observable cues, and then taking appropriate, lawful action. Continuous training and adherence to procedural justice principles are crucial for navigating such scenarios effectively and ethically. Question 18. Process analysis reveals a driver instructor in Waterford has been coaching a learner who is very eager to book their driving test, expressing significant anxiety about delaying the process. The learner has shown improvement but still struggles with consistently executing correct observations at junctions and maintaining appropriate speed in varying traffic conditions. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the instructor? Option A. Suggest the learner take the test as scheduled, but offer to accompany them during the test to provide subtle guidance, thereby increasing their chances of passing. Option B. Recommend the learner for the driving test immediately, explaining to them that the test environment itself can help them overcome their remaining minor hesitations. Option C. Advise the learner that due to their anxiety, it would be best to postpone the test indefinitely until they feel completely at ease, even if their driving skills are otherwise adequate. Option D. Advise the learner that while their eagerness is understood, they are not yet consistently demonstrating the required observational skills and speed control for safe independent driving, and recommend further practice focusing on these specific areas before booking the test. The correct answer is D. Advise the learner that while their eagerness is understood, they are not yet consistently demonstrating the required observational skills and speed control for safe independent driving, and recommend further practice focusing on these specific areas before booking the test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor because it involves balancing the immediate need to pass a learner driver with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and adherence to the Road Traffic Act 2010, as amended, and associated regulations governing driver licensing in Ireland. The instructor must exercise sound judgment to avoid compromising the integrity of the licensing process or putting other road users at risk. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the driver-instructor diligently assessing the learner's readiness based on their demonstrated ability to operate the vehicle safely and competently in various road conditions, as per the standards expected for a Waterford driving test. This includes evaluating their understanding and application of traffic laws, hazard perception, and overall control of the vehicle. If the learner consistently demonstrates proficiency and meets the required standards throughout the lesson, the instructor can confidently recommend them for the test. This approach aligns with the ethical duty of care owed to the learner and the public, and the legal requirement to only present candidates who are likely to pass and drive safely, as implicitly mandated by the licensing framework. Incorrect approach is analysis. Recommending the learner for the test despite clear indications of insufficient skill or understanding of road rules would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This would contravene the spirit and letter of the Road Traffic Act 2010, which aims to ensure only competent drivers are licensed. Such an action prioritizes the learner's immediate desire over public safety, potentially leading to accidents and contravening the instructor's professional obligations. Similarly, delaying the recommendation solely due to a personal desire to extend lessons without a genuine assessment of the learner's readiness is also unprofessional and potentially exploitative, failing to act in the learner's best interest and hindering their progress towards safe, independent driving. Finally, pressuring the learner to take the test when they are not ready, perhaps due to external pressures or a desire to secure future business, is unethical and undermines the integrity of the driver testing system. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and competence above all else. This involves a continuous, objective assessment of the learner's progress against established driving standards. When faced with a situation where a learner is eager but not yet fully prepared, the professional should clearly communicate the reasons for the delay, provide constructive feedback, and outline a clear plan for improvement. This transparent and ethical approach builds trust with the learner and upholds the standards of the profession and the regulatory framework. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new driver in Waterford is eager to practice complex maneuvers like parallel parking and hill starts on their very first lesson, despite demonstrating significant difficulty with basic clutch control and smooth gear changes. As a certified Waterford driving instructor, how should you best address this situation to ensure both client progress and road safety? Option A. Firmly refuse to teach any advanced maneuvers until the client has demonstrated perfect clutch control and gear changes, without further explanation. Option B. Proceed with teaching advanced maneuvers while briefly mentioning the importance of clutch control and gear changes, hoping the client will pick them up implicitly. Option C. Explain the necessity of mastering foundational clutch control and gear changes as a prerequisite for safe and effective driving, as mandated by the principles of the Waterford Road Traffic Act, before introducing more advanced techniques. Option D. Agree to the client's request to practice advanced maneuvers immediately to maintain client satisfaction, even if their fundamental skills are weak. The correct answer is C. Explain the necessity of mastering foundational clutch control and gear changes as a prerequisite for safe and effective driving, as mandated by the principles of the Waterford Road Traffic Act, before introducing more advanced techniques. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Waterford driver instructor because it involves a direct conflict between a client's expressed desire and the instructor's professional obligation to ensure road safety and adherence to the Waterford Road Traffic Act. The instructor must balance client satisfaction with the paramount importance of safe driving practices and legal compliance. The challenge lies in effectively communicating the necessity of mastering fundamental skills before progressing to more complex maneuvers, without alienating the client or compromising their learning experience. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly explaining to the client that mastering the foundational skills of clutch control and smooth gear changes is a mandatory prerequisite for safe and effective driving, as stipulated by the principles of the Waterford Road Traffic Act concerning driver competence. This approach prioritizes safety and legal compliance by reinforcing the structured learning process essential for obtaining a Waterford driving license. It involves patient instruction, demonstrating the importance of these skills for vehicle control in various traffic conditions, and setting clear learning objectives before introducing more advanced techniques. This aligns with the ethical duty of the instructor to ensure the client becomes a safe and responsible road user. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves agreeing to the client's request to practice advanced maneuvers immediately. This fails to uphold the instructor's duty of care and contravenes the spirit of the Waterford Road Traffic Act, which emphasizes a progressive and competency-based learning framework. It risks creating a driver who lacks fundamental control, leading to dangerous situations and potential accidents. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without providing a clear explanation. This can lead to client dissatisfaction and a breakdown in the learning relationship. While safety is paramount, a professional instructor should aim to educate and guide the client, not simply dictate terms. This approach lacks the pedagogical skill required to foster understanding and buy-in. A further incorrect approach is to proceed with advanced maneuvers while neglecting to reinforce the importance of clutch control and gear changes. This creates a superficial understanding of driving and fails to build a solid foundation. The client may appear to be progressing, but will likely struggle with essential vehicle management, particularly in challenging driving scenarios, thereby failing to meet the standards expected under Waterford driving regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, legal compliance, and effective pedagogy. This involves 1. Understanding the core requirements of the Waterford Road Traffic Act regarding driver competence. 2. Assessing the client's current skill level objectively. 3. Clearly communicating the rationale behind the learning progression, linking foundational skills to safety and legal requirements. 4. Adapting teaching methods to address client concerns while maintaining professional standards. 5. Setting achievable learning goals and providing constructive feedback. Question 20. The performance metrics show a 15% increase in driving test failures in Waterford over the last quarter. To understand the cause of this trend, a driving test center manager is considering several analytical approaches. Calculate the expected number of additional failed tests in the next quarter if this trend continues, assuming the average number of tests conducted per quarter in Waterford is 800. Option A, 105 additional failed tests. Option B, 90 additional failed tests. Option C, 135 additional failed tests. Option D, 120 additional failed tests. The correct answer is D, 120 additional failed tests. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the number of failed driving tests in Waterford over the past quarter. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a data-driven approach to identify the root cause of the decline in pass rates, balancing the need for rigorous testing standards with the potential impact on learner drivers and the efficiency of the testing center. A superficial analysis could lead to incorrect interventions that do not address the actual problem, potentially leading to unfair outcomes for test candidates or a dilution of safety standards. The best approach involves a detailed statistical analysis of the failure data, segmenting it by common failure categories, e.g., observation, signaling, vehicle control, and by individual examiners. This allows for the identification of specific areas where candidates are consistently failing, and whether any particular examiner's pass rates deviate significantly from the norm, considering factors like their assigned test routes and candidate demographics. This data-driven method aligns with the principles of objective assessment and continuous improvement mandated by the Road Safety Authority. RSA Guidelines for Driving Test Centers in Ireland. The RSA emphasizes evidence-based decision-making to ensure the integrity and fairness of the testing process. By pinpointing specific areas of weakness, targeted training or review can be implemented, which is a more effective and ethical use of resources than a blanket change. An approach that immediately suggests increasing the difficulty of the test or implementing stricter marking criteria without a thorough analysis is professionally unsound. This fails to acknowledge that the increased failure rate might stem from external factors, such as changes in driver training quality, new road layouts in Waterford, or even examiner variability, rather than a fundamental decline in candidate competence. Such an approach could unfairly penalize competent drivers and is not supported by the RSA's emphasis on objective and consistent assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to solely focus on individual examiner performance without considering the broader context. While examiner consistency is important, attributing all increased failures to individual examiners without investigating common failure categories or potential external influences is premature and potentially biased. This overlooks the possibility that a systemic issue might be affecting multiple examiners or that certain test routes in Waterford present unique challenges. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or general assumptions about learner-driver preparedness without consulting the detailed performance data is unprofessional. The RSA's framework requires quantifiable evidence to support any changes to the testing process. Professionals should adopt a systematic, data-driven decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem increased failure rate, 2. Gathering relevant data test results, failure categories, examiner data, test route information, 3. Analyzing the data to identify patterns and potential causes, 4. Developing hypotheses based on the analysis, 5. Proposing targeted interventions based on the most likely causes, 6. Implementing and monitoring the effectiveness of interventions, 7. Adjusting strategies as needed. This iterative process ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and aligned with regulatory requirements.